My name is Margaret Hale, and I'm 62 years old. Last night, my only son struck me so hard that I bled, over a bowl of soup I forgot to salt. The sting on my lip has faded, but not the memory of his calm face afterward. He had eaten dinner as though nothing had happened, as though violence toward one's mother were a common household ritual. When I woke this morning, every muscle screamed in protest. A dark bruise circled my arm like a cuff of shame. My reflection showed a split lip and swollen cheek. Still, I dragged myself out of bed before sunrise. The clock on the kitchen wall read 5:03 a.m., the same time I rise every day. Routine has become my disguise, the only way to pretend life is normal. Ethan, my son, my burden, my heartbreak, was already seated at the dining table in a pristine navy suit, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up when I entered. "Coffee, eggs. Now," he said flatly, voice cold as the tiles beneath my feet. No apology. No acknowledgement of last night. Just orders, like a master to his servant. I made his breakfast exactly as he likes. 3 spoons of cheese folded into scrambled eggs, 2 crisp toasts, black coffee with no sugar. Every measurement precise because a single mistake can turn the morning into a battlefield. When Ethan explodes, walls tremble, and I pay. As I placed the plate before him, the front door lock clicked open. Samantha, his wife, glided in wearing a mint green dress and heels that clicked like tiny hammers. She carried the scent of expensive perfume and the smile of someone who knows she owns every room she enters. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," she greeted me with sugary politeness, the kind she saves for when Ethan can hear her. "How are you feeling today?" I wanted to answer honestly. My ribs ache. "I bled last night because your husband forgot what love is." Instead, I smiled weakly. "I'm fine, dear." "Just fine." Samantha poured herself orange juice and kissed Ethan on the cheek. He responded with the charming grin that once melted my heart when he was 10 years old. To her, he is still that golden man, the successful executive, the devoted husband. To me, he has become a stranger who sleeps down the hall and carries his cruelty in polished shoes. Without looking up from his meal, Ethan said, "Mom, I bought you something yesterday." He reached into his briefcase and handed me a small box. Inside lay an expensive foundation, the kind celebrities advertise. "It'll cover the bruises from your little fall," he said, smiling faintly. Fall. That's what he called last night's beating. I swallowed hard and nodded, my throat dry as dust. The makeup probably cost half my monthly pension, the pension he controls completely. 2 years ago, he convinced me to let him handle my finances. "You shouldn't worry about numbers at your age," he'd said. Now my bank card sits in his wallet. "I haven't touched my own savings since," Samantha giggled, brushing his shoulder. "You're such a caring son, Ethan. Always looking out for your mother." If only she knew. If only she could see the bruises beneath my cardigan, the tremor in my hands whenever he enters a room. After breakfast, Ethan adjusted his tie, deep red, like irony, and leaned close to my ear. His whisper carried a chill sharper than winter wind. "Remember what I told you last night. You open that mouth of yours, and you'll regret it. No one will believe a senile old woman." Then he kissed my cheek for Samantha's benefit, left with his briefcase, and drove away in a black sedan he'd bought using my savings. When the house finally fell silent, I sank onto a chair and stared at the spotless table. Tears blurred the edge of the coffee cup. This home, once my pride, the one I bought after decades as an office assistant, had turned into my prison. It hadn't always been this way. 3 years earlier, when his first marriage collapsed, Ethan had shown up on my doorstep with a suitcase and watery eyes. "Just for a few weeks, Mom," he'd said, "until I get back on my feet." I believed him. I always believed him. The first months were peaceful. Shared dinners, laughter over old photos, the fragile illusion of family restored. Then came the subtle corrections. "Mom, the soup's too salty." "Mom, you missed a spot while cleaning." Little remarks that pricked but didn't bleed until they did. Soon he handled my bills, then my bank account, then my freedom. Now years later, every shadow in this house feels like his. I pressed the tissue against my lip and whispered to the silence, "How did you become this, my son?" Outside, dawn painted the sky in bruised purples and grays, the same colors modeling my skin. And as the light crept across the floor, I realized something chilling. The day was only beginning, and so was my nightmare. The next morning began the same way every morning did, with silence heavy enough to crush me. But something in the air felt different. The bruises on my body had deepened overnight, yet the ache inside me was sharper than ever. I moved slowly, through the kitchen, the way an old clock ticks when it's about to stop working. Ethan's mug waited on the counter, spotless and shining, just the way he liked everything in this house. The house that was mine once. The house that now felt like a museum curated by my son to display his control. By 6, I had his breakfast. Ready, scrambled eggs with cheese, toast cut diagonally, and steaming coffee. I'd perfected his routine down to seconds. If I served him too soon, he complained it was cold. If I was late, he accused me of being lazy. When he entered, his shoes clicking on the tiles, my chest tightened. He didn't greet me. He never did. He simply sat down, adjusted his cuffs, and began to eat. Then came the familiar sound, the door unlocking. Samantha swept in, her perfume announcing her before her voice did. She looked radiant, as always, her green dress hugging her like envy. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," she sang sweetly. "You're up early again." Her tone was pleasant, but her eyes were cold, eyes that never really saw me. "Oh, I'm always up early," I replied, forcing a smile. I wondered if she noticed the makeup barely covering my bruises. If she did, she didn't ask. "Ethan," she said, running her fingers through his hair. "I think Mom looks much better today, don't you?" Ethan looked up, his eyes piercing mine like knives wrapped in politeness. "Yes," he said evenly. "That foundation suits her." Samantha laughed softly. "You always take care of your mother. You're such a good man." The lie burned like acid in my stomach. When they finished breakfast, Ethan stood, adjusting his tie, a deep maroon one this time. He leaned close, his whisper soft enough for only me to hear. "Remember," he said, "if anyone asks about the bruises, you fell while mopping the floor." He smiled, kissed the top of my head, and walked out as though blessing me. Then, they were gone, their car disappearing down the street like freedom driving away without me. For a long while, I sat in that quiet kitchen, watching dust particles dance in the sunlight. My thoughts circled the same truth. I couldn't keep living like this. But what was the alternative? Where would I go? My savings, my pension, my house, all in his control. He had taken everything except the one thing I still owned, my silence. As I washed the dishes, I saw movement outside the window. It was Claire, my neighbor from across the street. She was watering her roses, humming an old tune I remembered from years ago. When she noticed me watching, she waved. I hesitated before waving back. For a second, I considered stepping outside to talk, but the fear of Ethan's disapproval froze me in place. Later that morning, as I was scrubbing the counters, I noticed the foundation bottle Ethan had given me. I picked it up, turning it in my hands. It was labeled Perfect Cover, 24-Hour Confidence. How ironic. Confidence bottled and sold to women who needed to hide. I laughed bitterly, but my laugh quickly turned into tears. When I finally stopped crying, I went to the bathroom mirror. I studied the woman staring back. Puffy eyes, trembling lips, a stranger wrapped in fear. Then slowly, I began to apply the makeup again, covering the proof of his cruelty. Every dab of foundation felt like a lie painted over the truth. But I couldn't let anyone see the real story on my skin. Not yet. By noon, I heard his car again. He had come back unexpectedly. My heart dropped to my stomach. I wiped my eyes quickly and hurried to the kitchen, pretending to be busy. He entered with a briefcase and a cold expression. "There's a lunch tomorrow," he said. "Samantha's bringing her friends. Make something decent. Seafood, pasta, dessert, and wine." He tossed 3 $20 bills on the table. "That's all you'll need." $60. For 5 people. "Yes, Ethan," I said quietly. He paused, narrowing his eyes. "And wear the makeup. I don't want you embarrassing us." He turned and left before I could respond. When the door closed, I let out a shaky breath. I pressed my palm to my chest, feeling the thud of my heartbeat. Lunch with his wife's friends, strangers who'd smile at my bruised face and call me sweet. I wasn't sure I could endure it again. That evening, I made a list for the groceries and counted every coin I had hidden in an old biscuit tin. Not much, but maybe enough to buy the cheap wine and some frozen shrimp. As I sat there writing, I noticed my hands trembling uncontrollably. Then I realized it wasn't just fear anymore. It was anger. A small, unfamiliar flame, but real. When I went to bed that night, the echo of Ethan's threats filled the house. But beneath it, another voice whispered, my own. It said, "You deserve to live." The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, but it felt pale and hollow. I stood before the mirror, dabbing foundation over the bruises on my neck. It hid the color, but not the memory. Then I fixed my hair, put on a floral blouse, and picked up my grocery list. The words swam before my eyes. Pasta, shrimp, wine, lettuce, bread. 5 people, $60, and no peace. At the supermarket, I moved slowly through the aisles, calculating every cent in my head. I reached for frozen shrimp instead of fresh, the cheapest pasta brand, and a bottle of white wine that claimed fine taste, but cost less than my regret. Every item felt like a reminder of my smallness. At the register, a familiar voice startled me. "Margaret? Is that you?" I turned to see Clara, my neighbor from across the street. Her silver hair was tied in a neat bun, and she wore that gentle smile that hadn't changed in years. "Clara?" I tried to sound cheerful. "How lovely to see you." "I've been worried," she said softly. "You've hardly stepped outside lately." "Oh, just busy with house chores," I lied. Her eyes lingered on my lip, where the makeup had started to crack. "Did you hurt yourself?" she asked. "It's nothing," I said quickly. I tripped on the stairs. Clumsy me. Her expression told me she didn't believe it, but she let it go. "Well, if you ever need anything, my door is always open," she said, touching my arm lightly. That gentle touch almost undid me. I swallowed hard and nodded. "Thank you, Clara." Back home, I unpacked the groceries and began cooking. By noon, the house smelled of garlic and herbs, though the scent could not mask the tension tightening my chest. I set the table with the good china, the one Ethan insisted I use only for guests. The napkins were perfectly folded. The cutlery sparkled like nothing in my life ever did. At exactly 12, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Samantha stood there, her smile glossy as a magazine cover. 3 elegantly dressed women followed her, heels clicking against the marble floor like a metronome of judgment. "Mrs. Hale," Samantha said sweetly, "meet my colleagues, Beatrice, Brenda, and—" She paused before introducing the last one. "And Evelyn," my breath caught. It couldn't be. Standing before me was my younger sister, Evelyn Harper, a woman I hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. Her hair was shorter, her expression more guarded, but those eyes, and the same green as mine, widened in shock when she saw me. We stared at each other for a heartbeat too long before she quickly composed herself. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Hale," she said, her voice careful, professional. Her disguise was flawless. She knew something was wrong. I could see it in the tightness of her smile. I guided them all to the dining room, pretending not to tremble. The table gleamed beneath the chandelier light, everything arranged with desperate perfection. They complimented the food, the house, the decor, empty words echoing through an empty heart. Beatrice raised her glass. "To family and success," Samantha beamed, "and to my wonderful mother-in-law, who makes everything perfect." Her words cut deep. Perfect. The word Ethan used when he wanted obedience. I smiled because that's what a perfect mother does. Evelyn's gaze never left me. She asked casual questions, her tone light but probing. "And what did you do before retirement, Mrs. Hale?" "I was a secretary at a law firm for nearly 40 years, I answered, surprising myself with pride. "That's impressive," Evelyn said softly. "You must have handled a lot of responsibility." "Yes, a lot." It was the first real conversation I'd had in months, even if it was disguised as small talk. But Ethan's shadow lingered even in his absence. As I cleared the plates, I felt him there, in every rule, every watchful silence. The women chatted about travel and office gossip, but Evelyn's eyes followed me every time I turned my back. She could see the tension in my shoulders, the faint tremor in my hands. When I carried dessert, a small tiramisu I'd made from memory, she quietly followed me into the kitchen. "Need help?" she asked, closing the door behind her. "No, thank you," I whispered, refusing to meet her eyes. "Margaret," she said in a low, urgent tone, "what's going on here? Why are you acting like this?" I'm fine, I insisted, forcing a smile that trembled. Just tired. But then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart seized. Ethan was home early. Evelyn's face hardened as she recognized the fear in my eyes. "Who's coming?" she asked. "My son," I whispered. And before I could say more, the front door opened and Ethan's voice filled the house like a storm breaking. "Ladies," he called, cheerful as ever. "How's my favorite group of professionals?" He walked in wearing that charming grin, the one that fooled everyone but me. As he placed a hand on my shoulder, I stiffened. His fingers dug in, just enough for me to feel the message beneath his smile. "She's the best mother," he said proudly. "Always takes care of everyone." The others laughed politely, but Evelyn's eyes burned. She saw it. She knew. When the guests finally left, Ethan's tone changed. "You did well," he said coldly. "For once you didn't embarrass me." He turned toward the hallway. "By the way, tomorrow someone's coming to check your computer. Stop visiting those stupid websites." My blood froze. He knew I'd searched for help. That phone call replayed in my mind all night. The voice had been firm, professional, and unsettling. "Mrs. Hale," he'd said, "this is Mr. Castillo, the senior accountant at your son's company. There are discrepancies in the accounts involving your name. We need to speak privately." I barely slept after that. Every sound from Ethan's room made me flinch. By morning, I'd convinced myself it had to be a misunderstanding. Ethan worked for a respected corporation. He was clever, ambitious, successful. Surely the company had made some mistake, but deep down, something cold and heavy told me the truth. At 8 o'clock, Ethan left for work, muttering a few clipped instructions about dinner. As soon as his car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my purse and walked to the bus stop, trembling. Every step felt like rebellion. The building downtown was a tower of glass, modern, sleek, merciless. Inside, I was greeted by a receptionist with perfect posture and colder eyes than marble. "I'm here to see Mr. Castillo," I said softly. He asked me to come. She made a call, then gestured toward the elevators. 18th floor. The elevator ride felt endless. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked smaller with every passing floor. When the doors opened, I found myself in a corridor that smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. A man in his 50s greeted me at the end. Gray suit, kind eyes, a face used to delivering bad news gently. "Mrs. Hale," he said, shaking my hand. "Please, sit." I obeyed, my palms damp. He opened a folder thick with papers. "I'm afraid this isn't easy. We've discovered unauthorized transfers from the company's account to a personal bank account under your name. And then within hours, that money disappears." My stomach turned. I don't understand." Mr. Castillo removed his glasses and sighed. "Mrs. Hale, we believe your son has been diverting funds through your pension account to hide the theft. Over $50,000 in 6 months. The room tilted. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "No," I whispered. "He manages my finances, yes, but I didn't. I never touched that money." "We know," he said gently. "That's why we called you before taking legal action. We want to clear your name, but for that, you'll need to file an official statement confirming you had no knowledge of these transactions." I nodded numbly. My hands trembled as I signed the preliminary declaration. Each letter of my name felt like another truth cracking open. When I stepped out into the sunlight, the world looked different. Harsher, louder, realer. My son wasn't just cruel. He was a criminal. He'd been using me as a shield, a scapegoat, a name to hide his corruption behind. For hours, I wandered the city streets, unsure where to go. People passed me without seeing me, just another invisible woman carrying invisible wounds. By the time I returned home, it was close to evening. Ethan was already there, sitting on the couch, scrolling his phone like a king awaiting tribute. "Where were you?" he asked, his tone casual but sharp beneath the surface. "I went out," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I needed air." His eyes narrowed. "Air?" He stood slowly, stepping closer. "Or answers?" He studied my face like a predator gauging prey. "Did you go somewhere you shouldn't have, Mom?" "I went to your office," I said before I could stop myself. His expression froze. The facade of calm cracked just enough for me to see the panic flash behind his eyes. "What?" "I met with your company's accountant," I continued, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. "They know about the stolen money, Ethan, about the transfers." He stepped forward, voice low and venomous. "You have no idea what you're talking about." $50,000, I said, You used my account to hide it. He grabbed my arm. The same bruised spot from before. Listen to me, he hissed. That money was mine. I earned it. You owe me everything. The roof over your head, the food you eat. With my pension, I said through clenched teeth. With my life. He released me, stunned by my defiance. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not of exposure, but of losing control. You're making a huge mistake, Mom, he warned. No one will believe you. You're old, forgetful. I'll make sure everyone sees that. Maybe, I said softly. But this time, I'm not staying silent. His hand twitched as though to strike me, but before he could, the doorbell rang. It was Clara, standing outside with a casserole dish in her hands. Hello, dear, she said kindly. I thought I'd bring you something warm. I heard voices. Behind her stood Evelyn, dressed casually, her eyes sharp and determined. Is everything all right here? Clara asked, her voice just loud enough to make Ethan step back. Ethan forced a tight smile. Of course. My mother just burned dinner. You know how older women get. But Clara's gaze lingered on me, reading the fear behind my eyes. Evelyn touched my arm lightly. Mrs. Hale, she said in a tone layered with meaning, if you need anything, and day or night, I'm here. Ethan's jaw tightened. The mask was slipping. The storm that night wasn't only in the sky. Rain lashed against the windows as Ethan paced through the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low but sharp. I stayed still in my bedroom doorway, barely breathing. Every few seconds, I caught fragments of his words. Bank, papers, transfer. Then, in a chillingly calm tone, he said, Tomorrow. 10 sharp. She'll sign. The line between fear and fury blurred inside me. I knew what those words meant. He wanted me to go with him to the bank and sign documents that would clear his name, documents that would make me the criminal. At dawn, I heard him moving again. He was up early, whistling softly, pretending everything was normal. When I entered the kitchen, he was already seated, his suit perfectly pressed, his tie black this time, the color of control. Morning, Mom, he said cheerfully. I hope you slept well. His false sweetness was more terrifying than his anger. I nodded, silent, and placed his coffee before him. He smiled. Good, because today's important. We're going to the bank at 10. We'll clear up that silly misunderstanding with the company. Silly misunderstanding, he called it, as if theft. Abuse and betrayal could be brushed off like spilled coffee. I'm not going anywhere, I murmured. His smile vanished. Slowly, deliberately, he set down his cup. What did you say? I said I'm not going. He stood up, the chair scraping the floor like thunder. You will go, Mother, and you'll smile. You'll sign whatever they put in front of you. Why? I whispered. So you can walk free while I take the blame? His hand twitched, but this time he didn't hit me. He didn't have to. His words struck harder. Look around you, he said softly. This house, the food, the bed you sleep in, all of it exists because I allow it. Without me, you have nothing. And if I decide to tell people you're losing your mind... He paused, letting the silence fill with threat. They'll believe me. He finished his coffee in one gulp and grabbed his keys. I'll be back at 9:30. Be dressed, be ready, and wear that makeup. You're not embarrassing me again. Then he left, the door slamming like the final word of a cruel sentence. The moment his car disappeared, my knees buckled. I fell against the counter and wept, not out of weakness, but rage. How had I let this man, my own son, turn me into his hostage? A knock at the back door jolted me upright. It was Clara, her coat soaked from the rain, eyes wide with urgency. Margaret, open up, she whispered. Quickly! When she came in, she looked around as if expecting Ethan to burst in behind her. I heard everything last night, she said. I saw him through the window, pacing, yelling. You need to listen to me. I've set up a camera near your kitchen window. It's hidden in the bushes. It's recording everything, my breath caught. A camera? She nodded. It's already captured him shouting, threatening you, talking about those bank papers. We have proof, Margaret. Real proof. I couldn't speak for a moment. Proof. The one thing Ethan had always said I'd never have. What can we do with it? I asked finally. Clara smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes from courage, not happiness. I have a friend who works with the district attorney's office, she said. Her name is Brenda. She specializes in domestic and financial abuse cases. If you come with me right now, we can show her everything. I hesitated, fear twisting my insides. If he finds out I left, then he'll destroy you, Clara interrupted. If you don't leave, he'll make you sign those papers and you'll lose everything, even your name. I looked toward the clock. 8:30, Ethan would be back in an hour. My hands shook as I picked up my purse. Inside were my identification, a few old photos, and the last fragments of my dignity. I'll come, I said finally. Clara squeezed my hand. Good. You're doing the right thing. We hurried through the rain to her car, my heart pounding like a drum of defiance. For the first time in years, I was running away instead of toward him. The district attorney's office was an old building with narrow hallways and walls lined with case files. Brenda, Clara's friend, met us in a small office filled with papers and the hum of old computers. When she finished watching the recordings Clara had captured, she looked up at me, eyes hard with resolve. Mrs. Hale, she said, this isn't just domestic abuse. It's blackmail, financial fraud, and coercion. With this evidence, we can have your son arrested today. But I need you to make an official complaint. Right now. I froze. Ethan's threats echoed in my mind. You'll regret it. You'll die alone. But then I thought of Clara risking herself for me, of Evelyn's knowing eyes at lunch, of the way the bruises never fully healed. I straightened my back. I'll do it, I said. I'll file the complaint. Brenda smiled gently. Then let's begin. While I signed the statement, she called the police, coordinating the arrest. As I wrote my name, my hand trembled, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was adrenaline. It was freedom starting to breathe. By 10:30, Brenda's phone rang. She put it on speaker. Mrs. Hale, a voice said. We have him. Your son has been taken into custody. I covered my mouth with both hands. Tears blurred my vision, tears of shock, of relief, of something close to triumph. Clara squeezed my shoulder. You're safe now, Margaret. But as we drove home, a strange silence settled over me. The house that once trapped me was now wrecked. The couch torn, dishes shattered, family photos broken. Yet even in ruin, it felt like mine again. I didn't sleep that night. Ethan's voice from the voicemail replayed over and over, shaky, desperate, almost human. Mom, please. You don't know what you've done. For a moment, the mother in me stirred, the one who used to bandage his knees, stay up through his fevers, whisper lullabies into the dark. But that woman was gone now, buried beneath years of bruises and fear. The next morning, Clara brought me tea and a small smile. They're keeping him overnight, she said. The charges are serious: embezzlement, coercion, assault. The accountant's testimony and the recordings sealed it. I nodded slowly. My hands still trembled, but they weren't trembling from fear anymore. It was the shock of freedom. I don't know what to feel, I whispered. Whatever you feel, Clara said gently. You've earned it. Later that afternoon, I sat by her window, watching the rain-soaked world outside. The quiet felt strange, like standing in a room after a storm has passed and realizing it's still standing. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail, this one from Evelyn. Margaret, it's me, she said softly. I saw the news. I'm so proud of you. You did what none of us could. I'm coming to see you. Her voice broke near the end. That tiny crack carried years of guilt and forgiveness. I wept as I listened, pressing the phone to my chest. By evening, Evelyn arrived. When she entered Clara's house, we just looked at each other, two sisters who'd lived entire lifetimes in silence. Then she wrapped her arms around me. I should have come sooner, she said, her voice thick with tears. I should have told someone, I replied. But I was too ashamed. She pulled back, holding my face in her hands. You were surviving, not failing. We talked for hours, about the past, about Ethan, about the years we lost. I told her everything, from the first time he raised his voice to the last time he raised his hand. She didn't interrupt or judge. She just listened, the kind of listening that heals. The next morning, the police called. They wanted me to come to the station to finalize my statement. When I arrived, the officer led me into a quiet room where Ethan sat behind a glass window. He looked nothing like the man who once strutted through my house. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow. For the first time, he looked small, like the frightened boy who once hid behind me during thunderstorms. When he saw me, he leaned toward the glass. Mom, he said hoarsely, please withdraw the complaint. I can fix everything. They'll ruin me. I'll lose my job, my wife. I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. You already ruined everything, Ethan. You just didn't notice. His jaw tightened. You're my mother. I said quietly. But you stopped being my son when you stopped being kind. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Sorrow, maybe, or shame. Then he turned away. As I left the station, the sunlight broke through the gray clouds for the first time in days. It touched my face, warm and gentle, something I hadn't felt in years. Clara and Evelyn were waiting outside, their smiles small but full of pride. It's over, I told them, though my voice trembled. Clara shook her head softly. No, Margaret. It's just beginning. That evening, I returned home for the first time since his arrest. The house was quiet, almost painfully so. I walked through every room, touching the walls, the photographs, the furniture I'd once dusted in fear. Everything looked the same, yet it all felt new. In the living room, I picked up a framed photo of Ethan as a boy, missing front teeth, covered in mud, laughing at something long forgotten. My eyes stung, but I didn't cry this time. I whispered to that smiling child in the picture, I hope wherever that little boy went, he finds peace. I placed the photo back on the shelf and opened the windows wide. Cool evening air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and freedom. Days later, I visited the community center downtown. A counselor there asked if I'd be willing to speak to other women, mothers, wives, sisters, who lived in silence like I once did. I hesitated, then nodded. I'll tell them my story, I said. I'll tell them that silence protects no one, not even the ones we love. When I stood in front of that small group for the first time, my voice shook at the beginning. But as I spoke, it steadied. Every word felt like reclaiming another piece of myself. By the end, the room was quiet. Not out of pity, but respect. Later that night, as I walked home beneath a pale moon, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on others, but the kind that grows inside when you finally stop being afraid. I'm not the woman I was before. I'm not the mother he tried to break. I am Margaret Hale, and for the first time, my life is mine again.